Welcome to Qdabra's weekly webinar. This is Patrick Halstead at Qdabra, and today we're talking about two cool techniques to edit your lists from InfoPath. And I am recording this. I want to wish everyone a happy 4th of July here in the United States. We are a small company, and we do a lot of things for you regarding SharePoint. We have a new t-shirt coming out. If anyone wants that, let me know. Today we're talking about these two techniques, and actually they're very similar. In one case, we're going to look at connecting an InfoPath form to a SharePoint list, and in the second case, we'll do the same thing, but we'll show how to use dropdown to edit the items. So we have a list in SharePoint, and here's my list. I have a list of customers, strange customers, they may be. Columns for company, contact name, phone number, pretty simple list. And what I'm going to do is quickly show a demo of this working, and then I'm going to show you how I did it. And so we have here, actually we have it working in the browser. And that's the second demo. Just navigate to the library where we have it. And this technique is pretty interesting because when you're designing a list in SharePoint, the list is great because it's simple. You can add items to it, but it doesn't support repeating structures, so it's hard to edit multiple items at the same time. You can do a data grid view, but you get this very tabular format. Now, this is the first time that I'm navigating to the browser form this morning on this machine, so there's a little bit of a lag here, but we should see it come up shortly. And let's wait for it here. There it is. So I've got my customer list here, and you can of course remove the ribbon, and you can make this a web part that works in your form. And here I'll just go in here and I'll edit one of these items. I'll edit, let's say we'll edit autonomy systems here, and we'll add LLC to it. Now, when I do this, you'll see that there's a post back. It has to go back to the server to run some logic. And that logic, I'll show you in a minute, but it's basically we're highlighting the one we changed in yellow. I don't know if you can see this, but it is indeed yellow. And we're also actually copying it down below. Now, in your form, you wouldn't actually show it in two places, but this is just to show you that we've edited it. And of course, I can hit the submit button. I can do multiple edits at the same time. Let's change this one here to Office 365. We'll say Xbox. And then we'll change Nike Incorporated to just Nike. Okay. And of course, we could change other things here. We could change the number to make it more auspicious. Okay, so we've changed two items, and if we submit these, you'll see in a second here, if we go back to the list, where we have our data, lists and customers, you'll see that data was updated. So I changed the Office 365 to Xbox and the Nike Incorporated to Nike, and I changed the phone number there. I also updated my LLC. Now I can go in here and I can also just add a new item, and I can say new company, whatever. No validation yet on this one. And we can go back to the list and refresh it. And there's the new company. So what I've quickly showed, and I'll show how to do this in a second, what I've quickly demoed here is an InfoPath form, in this case in the browser. And the form is displaying everything in the list and allowing for edits. And there's some nice formatting. Okay, so how do I do this? First of all, let's go back. What are we trying to do? We're trying to connect an InfoPath form to a list to allow us to edit the repeating data and do it in a way that is smart. There are lots of cases where you'll want to do this today. First of all, InfoPath forms by themselves are richer than your list forms. They allow you to do more things, more controls, more repeating structures, actually repeating structures because you don't get that in the list form. And they're also great for doing logic, adding lookups to web services, things like that. So we want to use InfoPath because it gives us a rich surface, but we also want to use our lists because they're great for storing data. We want to use our lists kind of like you'd use a database table to store and retrieve data. And how do we do it? So I showed you the quick demo. I'm going to show you how. I'm going to step through how you do it step by step here. But there are several clever techniques that we're showing here. First of all, I'm going to create a blank form in InfoPath. And so here you have the InfoPath Designer. We're just going to use blank form. When we do this, we want to select the browser because we want this form to work in the browser. And this is important. If you're creating a dashboard like you're using InfoPath to simply edit the list, then you want to make sure that it's browser compatible because you don't want people to open up the filler, obviously, on the form on SharePoint. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add a data connection to that list. If you've got questions, feel free to ask them. I will not be looking at the questions until I'm done with the demo here. So this is just a SharePoint list we're connecting to, and the list name is let me type this in correctly. The list name is customers. And we'll pull down the company, the contact name, the phone number, and the email address for now. We have to get the ID. That's really important. Now we're not going to do this on load. We'll do this, actually, we could do this on load. Yeah, we'll do it on load. We're going to requery it again after we submit the data to refresh it. Okay, so we've added this to our form. Now, one of the clever techniques is to just actually to add this repeating structure that I just added into the form. And this is going to give us that table that you saw on top. And so if I preview the form now, it's going to show all the items in the list. Those are the items, right? Now I can edit these right now, but there's no submit yet. So we're going to add the submit next. Another technique that I like to do is I like to add dividers. So I'm going to, for the purpose of this demo, I'm going to show you how we edit the items by showing both the secondary data source, that's the list I connected to, along with the main data source, which is where the modifications are happening. And just to offset these, I'm going to insert a divider line here, and then I'll right-click it and choose borders and shading, and we'll make this really wide. Okay, so that's our divider, and now down below what we're going to do is we're going to actually add the fields to edit the form. So here I have, I want to add customers, it's a group, and then underneath this is going to be my repeating group for customer, and this is going to have those fields for a company, contact name, basically the same as what's in the secondary data source. An ID. Okay, so we set up our main data source, and now we'll drag this over here. Now, by default, you'll get one item when the form opens, and we don't want that. We want to have this to be blank, so we can go into our default values, and we can just remove this. Okay, so now it's not going to show up. When we preview the form, now what we'll see is we'll see the secondary data source on top, the divider, and the repeating main data source down below with the insert item. Okay, now the next step, since is to actually add the mapping to the list so that we can actually submit the data. And to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this form out first. And now you can use out-of-box techniques to do this. For the purpose of the demo, I'm going to use a technique that uses QRules because it's easier. And QRules has a bunch of 140 or 150 different commands that make your life easier. You don't have to write code, and it extends InfoPath and it works in the browser. And we have free trial out there. In fact, I'm using free trial right now. I'm going to inject my form with QRules. Now, if you want to do this without QRules, you can go back to our webinars from January and February, which we have posted on our website, and you can take a look at those. Definitely it's possible. It's just going to be a little more difficult to do it. So we just inject QRules into the form, and what that gives us now is if I go back to my form, you'll see that I have in the data source, the fields here, I've got QRules listed. And so that's just going to inject it with QRules. Now, the benefit of QRules is we're going to submit the data to SharePoint, to the list, and QRules handles the mapping. It also allows us to set values and to insert and delete items in the row, which we'll see in a moment. But first, we need to actually create the mapping. Now, QRules comes with a tool called the list mapping tool. It's basically installed. So when you install QRules, it comes with this InfoPath, the SharePoint list tool, which allows you to create the mapping. And it's pretty straightforward. You want to make sure that we're on defined mapping. We're going to actually add our InfoPath form template here to the mapping tool, and then we'll put in the address for the SharePoint site. What we're going to do is we're going to define the mapping. Our fields are all the same as the fields in the list. It's going to be pretty simple, but let's just go ahead and query SharePoint and get all those lists. So you see here we have customers in this list now. All the libraries and lists are queried. This is going to be a repeating data structure, and the data structure is going to be customer, and we're going to map the field company equal to obviously the company, and so on. So this tool can be used just to really simplify your mapping, and then it will save out the mapping for you, so you don't have to worry about the complexity of creating these mappings. This is one of the main benefits of using QRules over the out-of-box technique. Is the out-of-box technique requires you to hand enter this. So once we've done this, we'll save our QRules mapping, and I'm just going to call this mapping 2 because I already have done this once. And then we'll go back to our form. Now, it's always the best practice to save this out as well, but we'll leave that open for now. Let's see here, I opened it twice. Now what we'll do is we'll add it here. So we'll add the data connection to, it's a received data connection, and it's an XML document. And we'll browse to the location, and there it is. We'll call this, we're just going to call the name of it mapping because I want to use the same name I used in the previous demo. Okay, now we've got the mapping set up. Now we need to obviously add a button to submit the data, but before we do that, there's a couple of cool things we need to do. One is that we need to actually set up the, we've gone through steps 1 through 5, and actually 1 through 6. And now we need to do the final 5 steps. We need to add a submit data connection to the SharePoint update list command. So let's do that. So we're going to add one more data connection, and that's going to be to that SharePoint site. And it's going to be a SOAP web service call. Actually, this is a submit. Be careful here. And we're going to submit it to SharePoint's web service, and the web service is underneath the VCAD bin folder, and it's called the we have to type it in correctly. Sorry about that. You know it's a live demo and he makes a mistake. And it's just the lists ASMX, which comes with SharePoint. And underneath lists ASMX web service, you'll have a web method for update list items. That's what we want. And now here we have to specify that QRules, actually not QRules, but the mapping. There's a list collection here that we're going to specify. And for the updates, we also want to specify the mapping. And this is just going to make our life a lot easier because it's going to, we just have to set these up so that when we submit to it, it's going to submit everything correctly. And this is all in documentation, but we'll call this list submit. And now we can add our button to our form. And the button is going to be it's going to call that command. But the way we do that submit is we're actually using QRules, so that the QRules command will be, let's go to manage rules, and we're going to add an action to set the value. And that value is going to be in QRules command, and we set it equal to submit to SharePoint list, and the mapping is equal to the mapping file, and we have to specify the submit is equal to list submit. It's the data connection. And then the last thing we have to do is mention the ID is equal to my ID. And that's going to be the XML path, that's the location of your ID in that repeating data structure. I don't think that the order matters here, but since I did this earlier like that, I'm going to change the order. Okay, so now we've done that. We also, when we submit this, we want to requery it. So we'll add another command here, another rule, another action to requery the data from the customers. And I think that's about it. Let me check my, my previous example. One more thing that is useful is to delete the items in this main data source, because we've already added them. We actually haven't added them yet. I'll show you that in a second. But we want to delete them. And that's pretty simple. We'll just add another action. QRules comes with a couple, well, lots of different commands that are very useful. And one of those is the delete command. And I think that's the right XPath. But if you're uncertain about your XPath, you can just go in here and you can click this and do copy XPath here, and that will give you the right path to that node. And just see the clipboard, so the control V, it looks like it was the same. Okay, so now let's do one more thing. We have to set up the rules for the secondary data source, so when something changes on top, we want to set up the rules so that we're adding it down below. And for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a rule, and the condition is going to be if the ID does not already exist. And this is kind of tricky, but what you're going to do is you're going to say if the you're going to select this item here, ID. Actually, we're going to select ID here, and what we're going to say is all occurrences. So down below, when you select, I'm sorry, I'm doing this wrong. If you go to main data source, and yeah, right the first time, ID is equal to, and then we're going to select it from the main data source. I got this wrong. Select field or group. We switch to the main data source and select this repeating structure. And then we should be able to say down below any occurrence or all occurrences of ID. So we want to say, hey, have we ever added this before? And that means that we want to say all occurrences of ID are equal to the ID that we're on in the secondary data source. Now, by default, InfoPath isn't going to give you a very smart expression here. It's going to give you this not, actually everything is correct except for the last part. And so this is the first clever technique that we have. And for this technique, I actually have copied what I want to copy in there. I'm actually going to basically just help InfoPath to get the current ID. So I want to use the same exact expression that InfoPath created, but notice that I've actually simplified the end of it. So I want to remove this piece right at the end, basically. You want to remove everything from there, and you want to replace it with current, just like that. And notice that the XPath is slightly different. Actually, this is the same. It's slightly different because we are actually removing this here. And you can just copy this over, and it will parse it out correctly. So that's the one clever thing there is we're saying, hey, if we have not added this item before, in other words, when we edit this row, we're going to add it to the main data source, then we're going to have an action, and the action is going to be to insert it. And here, I'm just going to switch now to the one I did previously, so for time reasons. And you can see that we're just going to execute the InfoPath command, the QRoles command to insert. We'll insert the child item, and then we will set the ID. This is another clever technique. We're setting the ID equal to the value of the ID. We're saying actually the last row here, that we're using this last row in the main data source, we're setting that ID equal to the value of the one that we're changing. So what this means is that when we change company, we type in a new company or a new phone number, it's going to automatically add an item to our main data source down below, and it's going to set the ID. Then in the main data source, we have default values that are set equal to the secondary data source. The default values are calculating with the filter, saying, please update me whenever that secondary data source changes. And for the purpose of this demo, we're actually allowing people just to edit the secondary data source that we connected to as a very first step. So those are the three clever techniques there. A, we're checking to see if the ID has been added before. B, we're going to be inserting it and setting the value equal to the current row that we're on. And then C, we're going to automatically update these values when it changes. Once it's been added to the main data source, we automatically update these values based on the secondary data source. Now, why are we adding these to the main data source to begin with? Well, we don't have to, but it's a lot easier to configure the submit command if we only update the ones that changed. So let's take a look at this again. I'm just going to preview this now, the filler. We saw this in the browser earlier. So here's our form again, and notice that I can just change any of this here, and it will insert it down below. It highlights it. Actually, I didn't show you that. There's the same technique for checking whether it's in the list down below can be used to highlight it. Here we have a formatting rule on the right that is just checking all occurrences of. In this case, if it exists, so it's not, it's just plain. If it exists, then we highlight it. And in this case, it does exist, so we're highlighting 8 up above here to show that it is down below. Okay, and then when we click submit, it's going to submit those items to the list, requery it, and once we requery it, it's going to delete those items from the main data source. But because we requeried it, those items will show up here on the top correctly. And we can go back to our list on SharePoint. We can refresh it. And we can see if those items were updated correctly. Okay, so that's the quick, in-depth demo of how I did it. Once again, pretty simple, and you'll get the sample, but it's pretty simple to set up these submit SharePoint list mappings with the tool that we have. You can also, like I said, use Camel to do it. And I highlight a few of these clever techniques using XML path to check whether something was a member of another table, and then format it if it was already there, or if it is not there, to insert it. So we use this condition to insert it, and then we set the value when we insert, and then because we set that value, the default values will automatically update based on that because there's a filter there to make sure that it's updated. Now, what I want to do is I want to show you another technique very quickly, and then we'll take questions. And this technique is also very cool. And this is, I have another list here And the list is called, let's see, I think it's called products. I think I have this here somewhere. So we have a list called products, and on that list we create a form. Basically, it has a drop down, and here we have some dairy products. And this is a form that has a drop down. So we're pulling the list data into the form, and we're showing it in the drop down. Now, how many times do you have users that say, well, it's not in the list, I want to add it? So we have this option now to add it. We just type in, what's it called, strawberry milk. We've got cheddar cheese, I guess. Here we have a bug in the browser. Like I said, you know it's live when it doesn't quite work correctly. So let's try that one more time. And now we have it in the list. It automatically adds it, submits it, and changes it back to a drop-down. And so how do we do this? Quick look at this form. And here's the designer. So the same technique applies. So basically this form is connected to that list. So we have a list connection here to the products. And then what we do is we have these two different fields. They're both bound to product in the main data source. So we have a field for the drop-down, and we have a field for the text. So when we switch between them, we just hide or show the one that we're on. So by default, they're going to get the drop-down. If they click Add New Product, we show them the other text box, and they can enter the product themselves. And then they click the Add Product button. It automatically is going to submit it to SharePoint using the same technique we just showed. And that's a very clever technique to make your drop-downs editable. So back to the slideshow here. So it's the same technique. It's just the only thing that's different in the drop-down example I showed was that you're hiding and showing these controls based on which mode you're in. So key pieces to the puzzle. Obviously, we're using InfoPath, and this technique works 2007 through 2013. SharePoint 2010 is needed for the web service, but you also need it for form services if you want to display this up in the browser. And then QRules makes your life a lot easier. Of course, you can use Outbox Camel, but you will still need QRules or something to set those values if you're doing it the same way I'm doing it. But you don't have to. You could use Camel technique to do it completely out of the box without anything from us, and you can take a look at those previous webinars. But I really like this technique. Just a quick shout out here before we go to questions. We are here to help you with your electronic forms in SharePoint. We do focus on InfoPath. We're experts there, but we also have experts on SharePoint workflow. We do a lot of custom workflow actions. If you need training, if you need help, please don't hesitate to contact us. And we do have a Contact Us page on Qdabra.com. I want to thank you for joining me today. If you're seeing this webinar on YouTube, you can click on this link here. You can go to the link, and you can get the webinar kit. The webinar kit for today comes with the samples I showed, along with the presentation, and there will be a document. So I'll be packaging this up later today and sending this out. If you fill the feedback form out, it's just 4 questions, just take you a minute, then we will send this to you for free. But if you're seeing this after the fact, then we'll have a small processing fee here. And we thank you again for your for being here and for watching us on the 4th of July. I have a couple questions, and first question is from David. And David wants me to talk a little bit about list name for submit and how it improves portability. So let's go back to the form. And I guess what you're saying here is, and let me just read your second question here. So, so the previous Qdabra logs walkthroughs have the submit data connection not specifying any mappings on the update list items connection, and instead using the QRules submit function to call the mapping file. Pros, cons of using the explicit definitions you used in today's demo. Well, not quite sure I understand the question, but I could probably just give you the floor. That might be the easiest way to do this. You know, we're using just a name here, and I don't think this is explicit today either. I'm just using the name when I call the command for Q rules. So here, you know, I have to use the name of the data connection here to tell it, you know, please use this. And so it has to actually equal the same. So the data connection name here, list submit, has to be the one that I'm using here as well. And those there's a correspondence there. Hopefully that answers your question. I'm sorry that I don't quite understand it. But yeah, those data connection names are important. The mapping is important too. We're using the mapping and the list submit names. If those were named something different, this command wouldn't work, right? Because it wouldn't find those data connections. So there is a slight binding there, or a tying between the command here and those actual names. But it's pretty easy to change. Obviously, you don't have to have Visual Studio to go in and change it. Ralph's got a question. Do you have a recommendation for a maximum number of list items in a list when using these techniques? Yeah, you can definitely do filtering. So I didn't show this filtering technique, but 2010 in SharePoint comes with filtering. So before, I don't know if people would know this or not, but it's very easy to filter items in 2010. You just change the, it's an equivalence test. So you can actually set these IDs, and it will only query it using the filter. So if we say we only want this ID to be, we only want to get item 17, then on form load, what we would do is we would set ID in the secondary data source to 17, and then we would query the data connection, and it would only pull back that item. So with your list, you're going to be able to go up to 5, 10, 50,000 items, but you don't want to pull all that into your form. That's obviously going to take too much processing time to display it. It'll pull in fine. Loading that much data is very fast, but processing it so that it displays, especially in the browser form, will take way too long. So two techniques here. First technique is to actually have a technique here that I want to show you that I forgot to mention, which is called paging. We have a technique for paging that's pretty interesting here, and this is just basically InfoPath with we've added some default values here, and we're just using two controls to page back and forth between them. So what you would do is you might load in 500 items, and then what you'll do is you'll have here we have in our default data, we just have 13 items here. I've just added 13 of these items here to the paging sample, and then I just use these controls to control what the page is that I'm on, and then the repeating structure has a filter on it that shows. I'm sorry, where is it here? It is. There's a rule that hides it or something like that. So there's a rule that is filtering it. So if it's greater than or equal to the page number times 5, then we hide it. And so the page number increments or decrements, right, based on that. And what I would recommend, Ralph, is that you query up to, I don't know, several hundred items, and they just show 20 at a time using this paging. You could query 1,000 or 2,000 items. So long as you're not showing that many, it's not a big deal. But if you need to show all of them and you're not doing paging, then definitely I wouldn't query more than a couple 100 items or so, because it's just going to take too long for the browser to display them. So hopefully that answers your question. And David, more than happy to take your question offline if I didn't answer it completely. But I want to thank everyone else for joining me today. Once again, Patrick here at Qdabra, and we will be presenting again next week. Hope to have you here, and I'll be uploading this video as well as the documentation later today. Have a great day.